Joe Biden issues strident defensive refusal to call for ceasefire in Gaza. U.S. President says Hamas has said it will not stop attacking Israel and said Israeli forces had switched from aerial bombardment to more targeted operations. Joe Biden has presented an unapologetic defense of his refusal to call for a ceasefire in Gaza, arguing that Hamas presented a continuing threat to Israel and that Israeli forces were seeking to avoid civilian casualties. After a summit meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the APEC summit in San Francisco, Biden told reporters on Wednesday night that Hamas had pledged to continue its attacks on Israel. Biden also argued that Israeli forces had switched from aerial bombardment, which he seemed to acknowledge had been indiscriminate in parts, to more targeted ground operations, after more than 11,000 Gazans are reported to have died. He said, "It is not carpet bombing. This is a different thing. They're going through these tunnels, they're going into the hospital. They're also bringing in incubators or bringing in other means to help people in the hospital, and they've given, I'm told, the doctors and nurses and personnel the opportunity to get out of harm's way. So this is a different story than I believe it was occurring before, the indiscriminate bombing." Biden added, "The IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, acknowledge they have an obligation to use as much caution as they can in going after their targets. It's not like they're rushing to the hospital, knocking on doors, pulling people aside and shooting people indiscriminately." Biden also repeated a claim he made last month that babies had been beheaded in the Hamas attack. Hamas has already said publicly that they plan on attacking Israel again like they did before, cutting babies' heads off, burning women and children alive, he said. So the idea that they're going to just stop and not do anything is not realistic. The White House at the time clarified that U.S. officials had not seen evidence of this, and that Biden was referring to news reports. It was not immediately clear if new intelligence had emerged confirming such actions. Reports that Hamas beheaded babies in the October 7th attack on Israeli civilians remain unconfirmed, though the brutality of the massacre, in which about 1,200 people were killed, is not in doubt. The Israeli military made the claim in the first few days after October 7, but the claims have not been independently verified. Biden also suggested that a possible hostage deal was imminent, saying the Israelis had agreed to a pause as part of the deal, but then stopped short, appearing to acknowledge the uneasiness of Secretary of State Antony Blinken, finally adding, "I'm mildly hopeful." The forcefulness of Biden's defense of the Israeli military is notably out of step with recent remarks by senior U.S. officials, who have shifted their emphasis to appeals to the IDF to observe humanitarian law and avoid civilian casualties. It seemed to confirm reports that the president is more unreservedly pro-Israel than many in his administration. The president's comments came after the UN Security Council backed a resolution calling for urgent extended humanitarian pauses for a sufficient number of days to allow aid access into Gaza. The resolution, the first to be adopted after 4 previous failures, calls for humanitarian corridors across the Gaza Strip and urges the release of all hostages held by Hamas. The US and the UK, 2 potentially veto-wielding powers, abstained on the grounds that although they supported the emphasis on humanitarian relief, they could not give their full support because it contained no explicit criticism of Hamas. It is the first UN resolution on the Israel-Palestine conflict since 2016. Gilad Erdan, Israel's ambassador to the UN, said the resolution was detached from the reality on the ground. In an address to the Security Council, in effect announcing Israel would not abide by the resolution, but was already doing everything possible to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza, Erdan said, "This council has just adopted a resolution that is regretfully detached from the reality on the ground." This council still has not succeeded in condemning Hamas's October 7th massacre. The resolution focuses solely on the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and makes no mention of what led up to this moment. Israel does not need a resolution to remind us to adhere to international law. Israel always adheres to international law. Bringing our hostages home is Israel's top priority. Israel will continue to do whatever it takes to accomplish this goal. UN resolutions are in theory legally binding, but are widely ignored, and the political significance lies in the US willingness to back a call for an extended humanitarian ceasefire. The resolution came amid condemnation of Israel's decision to send troops into Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza, marking an escalation of Israel's offensive against Hamas. Hospitals are not battlegrounds, the WHO chief, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, said. We've lost touch again with health personnel at the hospital. We're extremely worried for their and their patients' safety. Late on Wednesday, the IDF released a video that it said showed some of the material recovered from an undisclosed building within the large hospital complex, including automatic weapons, grenades, ammunition, and flak jackets. Lieutenant Col Jonathan Conricus, an Israeli military spokesperson, said in the video, "These weapons have absolutely no business being inside a hospital." Hamas denied the claim, which it said was nothing but a continuation of the lies and cheap propaganda through which Israel is trying to give justification for its crime aimed at destroying the health sector in Gaza. On Wednesday evening, the chief Israeli military spokesperson, RADM Daniel Hagari, said troops found weapons, combat gear and technological equipment at Shifa, and were continuing their search of the complex. Israel has so far presented in public only limited evidence of the alleged command complex it claims lies under Al-Shifa, though it is widely accepted that Hamas has an extensive tunnel network across Gaza.